Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Young, and I'll be your host today on our third webinar in the series for the 2014 Transportation Site Impact Handbook. In this webinar, we will go over the second portion of Chapter 2 of the Site Impact Handbook. This chapter is called the Transportation Impact Process, and a major focus of today will be on trip generation. Chapter 2 is the largest chapter in the handbook, and therefore we will spend at least 2 webinars on this chapter. Today, we have with us many of the people who helped rewrite the handbook. They are here today to go over the major changes and also to answer your questions if possible. We have Gary Sokolow from FDOT Systems Planning, myself, Andrew Young, Gina Bunyani, we are all from the Florida DOT. We also have Nathan Hicks, who helped put this presentation together, and he will also be helping with answering questions. Though we do not all have formal speaking parts, all of us here have experience in different aspects of impact analysis, level of service calculations, growth management, and modeling. So if you ask questions, we are all available to help with our specific knowledge. There are a number of questions that come up every time, and we would like to get those answered at the start. At the end of this presentation, give us a few days and we will get you a complete copy of the presentation materials. We will be offering credits for the American Planning Association, and the number you see next to CM credits, you can use this number and you will need that in order to make your job easier to get those credits. The PDH credits for professional engineers are available through proof of attendance. In the past webinar, we sent certified lists of attendees with all the information necessary for your honor system credits as a professional engineer. Each of our presentations will be made into a recording. We will try to have this done as soon as possible, but editing a video takes a bit more time than putting together a copy of the presentation. We will show you where videos of previous webinars are available later in this presentation. There are a number. Since this is a webinar, you will be muted. However, you can ask your questions in a question tab dialog box, as I will demonstrate shortly. Please ask your questions as they come up, and we will try to get to them as quickly as possible. I'm sure there will be questions that we can't answer immediately, or questions that are more of a philosophical nature. These we may have to discuss at a later time, or send you answers via email. I'm going to briefly discuss how you can participate in today's webinar using the GoToWebinar control panel. By clicking the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. From the View menu, you can also set the control panel not to auto-hide when inactive if you prefer to keep it always open. The audio pane provides audio information. By default, you have joined the webinar via mic and speakers. Click Audio Setup to control your computer, headset, or speaker or headset devices. If you prefer, you can join with audio via the telephone by selecting the Use Telephone, and the third and dial information will be displayed, including an audio pin. If you'd like to ask any questions of today's presenters over the phone, you must enter your audio pin in order to have your line unmuted. If you have a question, you can send them through the questions pane. Simply type in your question and click Send. You may also raise your hand if you have a question. If you have joined us with the capability of using your microphone, we will then unmute you so you can ask a question that everyone can hear. We will be able to take questions and answers throughout today's webinar. As I've said in the previous webinar, there have been a lot of changes. However, many of the principles of site impact have not changed. That's the good news. We have changed the name of the handbook by adding the word site to clarify what kind of impact this handbook is about. One of the nice things that has not changed is the website where you can get the latest versions and any changes or additions we've made along the way. The link to the website is still the same, and we've included it on this slide for your use. So at this point, before we begin, we would like to have an idea who is out there, not just the numbers of people, but also who you represent. So Nathan, if you could get the poll ready.
One moment. I do not see any polls. Gary, are you able to see the polls?
Be happy to do it. Yes, I can see the polls. I will be happy to select the poll and be the pollmeister
All right.
during this session. And I have just opened the poll. Who do you represent? And I'm going to give you a moment here. Not only do we give these webinars, we go to a lot of webinars. They have changed the software recently pretty dramatically, and we have seen that there have been bugs in it. So do bear with us when things that we used to do before don't work the way they did. Okay, I am going to close the poll, and I'm going to share it. All right.
So mostly consultants, however we do have a good number of local and regional government representatives here, so, but still a pretty good mix. All right, so once you go to the website, you'll be given a choice to download the PDF document of the Site Impact Handbook. You can simply hover your mouse and mouse right-click over Save Target As. Then simply download the document to your computer.
Hey, can I just ask, just to make sure, since I did the polls, are people seeing, if you can see the cover of the Transportation Site Impact Handbook right now, raise your hand. All right, okay, good. I didn't need to close the poll in order for you guys to continue seeing it. Thank you. You used to have to do that. I apologize.
All right, so when you open the handbook in the PDF version, it opens with the bookmarks on the left for easy navigation to the parts you want to view. There are a few things I would like to tell you about the navigation of this document. The first is that we have a detailed bookmark section that should make navigation a little bit easier. Second is that the page numbering has been done in such a way to make it easy to find the references. This isn't as easy as it seems on the surface. However, we've made it easier by starting page numbering at the cover. We will show you how this can make a positive difference. When you begin the numbering at the cover, then the page numbers of the document, and then the page number, as they are represented in the Adobe Acrobat are the same. So when we tell you an answer is on page 134, you don't have to scroll around looking at the bottom right for the page number. You can simply enter 134 in the page number portion of your PDF reader program. So we have another poll for you. Did you attend our last webinar in May?
Okay, I will start this new poll, and I'll launch it. And let's see what we got. All right. Got a lot of repeat business here. I like that.
That's good.
I'm going to close the polls right now.
I know for you folks who've already attended our webinars, this is going to all sound like repetitive information, but we just like to go through this just in case there are some folks who have not attended our previous webinars.
Okay, so you can see 80% of you have been here last month, and we really would like.
Yeah, we like to see that.
Yeah, appreciate that. All right, I'm gonna
All right, so there we go. All right, as most professional documents, we do need to make you aware that transportation impact analysis is as much an art as it is a science. With that being said, we put a caveat at the bottom of every page, and I'd like you to read it. And it says that we have tried to have the most up-to-date information. However, due to changes in legislation and acceptable practices, we recommend you check with the links in this handbook. We have peppered this document with loads of web links that should be up to date if you have any doubt about the guidance in this printed material. In the previous webinar, we reviewed the beginning of Chapter 2. These sections covered the basic framework of a transportation site impact analysis. So we discussed the methodology development, moving into existing conditions analysis, future conditions analysis, and finally mitigation analysis. We also discussed study area requirements for an impact analysis. In addition, we discussed the differences between large and small-scale traffic studies, as well as existing conditions and data collection. We have included a slide here that includes a link to the YouTube site where we have uploaded the recorded site impact handbook overview. And another link on this slide for Chapter 2, Part 1.
Andrew, let me add something that there is a new feature here on GoToWebinar, and that is our ability to provide handouts during the meeting. On your control panel, you should be able to see something that says handouts, and we printed a handout copy of today's presentation in case you want to have that, and you can download it now if everything is working correct. All right, that's all.
All right, so at this point, we'll open it up to questions, and hopefully we can answer them for you. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Nathan,
Okay.
Are there any questions in the question pane?
There were no handouts available, is what I'm seeing in the question page. If you can see something that says handouts and it's available, would you raise your hand? Okay. So, okay, good. So, I apologize. The control panel here is all collapsed, and sometimes it's really hard to find things on it. You should find a little gray sliver that says handouts on it, and if you hit the plus sign, it should open up for you. If not, it will be the first thing you get. Okay. Excellent.
All right. Well, I guess at this point, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Gina Bagnani, who's going to discuss with you the transportation impact process.
Thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to our webinar. As Andrew mentioned, and as he refreshed your memory today as what we covered last time, so we're going to continue with Chapter 2, and as you all know, Chapter 2 still is the largest chapter since it's most closely related to our role as transportation agency. But the good news is that, as we mentioned previously, much of the basic guidance really have not changed in regard to how to determine the impacts of new growth. So it's still same as what it was in 2010. But as you know, whenever we update our models, methodology, or we change our calculation techniques. So we would like to reflect those changes into our handbook, which we have done, and we have updated Transportation Impact Handbook based on those changes. So today we're going to again continue with Chapter 2. We're going to concentrate on Chapter 2 only. All right, I'm going to talk about trip generation, really determining the impacts of the development on the transportation system. Really, it's confusing at times. So we need to know exactly the size of the development, and we need to know the trips that are generated from that specific development. One of the methodology or the techniques that we use, it's the ITE trip generation, and it's been updated to ninth edition. And again, there is a link right here that you can access and purchase the manual. And what I need to I'd like to mention to you today is that the difference between 9th edition and 8th edition. The 9th edition has really gone on, it's gone on many changes as far as content compared to 8th edition. So I'm going to go quickly over the changes to 9th edition, and the information is available for you to go and look to see what changes have been made. But I'm going to go over the changes very quickly because I don't want to take up too much time. What they have done in 9th edition, they have added 10 other new land uses. So I'm going to go over those land uses. One is data centers, snow ski area, mosque, museum, tractor supply stores, construction equipment, rental stores, variety store. Variety store came from Florida DOT research. And the other ones that they have added is recreational vehicle sales, medical equipment stores, and truck stop. So these are the new land uses that they have added. And other differences or update is that they have changed some of the namings of the land uses. For example, again, I'm going to go over a few of these. They have changed the truck terminal name to intermodal truck terminal, or they have changed the high cube warehouse to high cube warehouse / distribution centers. They have, for instance, added some new time periods. For example, I'm going to go over, let's say, soccer field. They have added a new time period. Sunday peak hour of generator was added, and few others. So there are, I would say, 4 pages of update to 9th edition. So you can, I don't want to go over everything, but I just wanted you to know what changes have been made and to this new edition of ITE. If you would like to purchase the manual, that's a link that you can access, and also depending on if you are a member or non-member, the price varies. And the handbook itself has a separate price, and the manual 9th edition has a different price. Okay, now let's get to determining the trip generated from a development. So what is a trip end? First, trip end, it's different than us, some of the traffic engineers, going to the field and counting vehicles at the intersection. So this is different. We do look at the cars, but also we call it trip end. So how do we count the number of trips going in and out a driveway? All right, a car going into a driveway, that's one trip, and a car leaving that establishment, that's another trip. So as you can see, this shows 2 trip ends. And how do we count these trip ends? A tube is laid at the entrance of land use or driveway. It counts the trips going in, and it counts the trips going out. And as you can see, the counter shows the number of trips going in and out. So 550 trips going out as an example, and 450 going out. So we have 1,000 trip ends altogether. Now, so we know the trip ends now, so we need to know the land use. We need to know the size of the land use, whether it's the square footage, whether it's number of dwelling, whether it's number of employees. So we need to know those specific independent variables in order to determine the trip rates. All right, so we said we have 1,000 trip ends, and let's work with square footage at this moment. So this development is 10,000 square foot. Okay, and so what we do, we say 1,000 trip ends divided by 10, because IT methodology is based on 1,000. Okay, so we say 1,000 divided by 10, that gives us 100 trip ends per 1,000 square foot. Okay, so now let's work with another independent value, which for this development is number of employees. Okay, so we said we have 1,000 trip ends, we have 50 employees. 1,000 divided by 50, that gives us 20 trips per employees. All right, let me ask you this question. Let's say a person drives around their city, make no stop, and returns back home. So let's see how many trip ends we have.
We're going to ask your opinion on this.
I want to make sure if you all understood what I just explained.
Even if we don't. All right. Got the vast majority of people who have answered this question. And I'm going to share that with you. And those of us experts here in this office, we thought it was 2 trips. We thought it was 2 trips, or 2 trip ends. Though this can be an esoteric question because the person didn't make any stops, but sometimes, you know, these trips do get counted in when studies are done. So we do believe it is 2 trip ends. Did I say that right, Gina?
That's correct, because the reason we say 2 trips, even though 70% did answer the right question, 2 trips, 22% said 1 trip. It is 2 trips because you leave, even though if you don't stop anywhere, but you still have to go back, right? So that makes it 2 trips. So like I said, counting the vehicles, you know, coming up with the daily traffic, it's different than counting the trip ends for the purpose of trip generated from any development. Very good. Okay. Like I said, IT has many independent variables. Okay. You know, each development or each land use code may have 1 or 2 independent variables. So which one do we use? Okay, for instance, shopping centers has gross leasable area. Office and other single land use has gross floor area. Okay, or apartments, dwelling units, gas station, fueling positions. Okay, so, you know, choosing the right variable, it's really important. Depending on the size of the development, so should I use number of dwellings? Should I use, for instance, for residential, number of dwellings? For offices, should I use number of the gross floor area, or should I use number of employees? It all depends on the size of the development. And really, these independent values do have impact on the outcome. So what is a gross leasable area, let's say for shopping mall? It's the area that you're leasing to a tenant. Okay, that doesn't include parking area or common pedestrian area. But let's say for office building, we'll look at it as a gross floor area. It's the whole area, including closets, everything on that floor. And for gas stations, we look at fueling position. Fueling position, first of all, it's different than number of pumps. Okay, as you can see in this picture, we have 4 fueling positions. But as you can see, we have 12 pumps. So fueling position is different than number of pumps. So this is single family detached housing, land use 210, comes from Trip Generation 9 edition. And as you can see, again, we'll look at the single family detached housing. That's a land use, the ITE land use code. And also there is this independent variable, which is dwelling units. And also it's based on weekday as far as time period. And I mean, just for your own information, as you can see, a number of studies that they did was 351 to come up with this rate. And from those 351 studies, average number of dwelling units was 197. And as you can see, average rate for this land use code 210, it's 9.57. Remember this average rate, 9.57, from the previous one, let's see, 9.52, okay, that came from 9th edition. So this one, 9.7, is based on 8th edition. As you can see, there isn't much difference really on some of these average rates when ITE 9th edition was updated. Okay, again, by looking at this is from ITE. This shows the trip generated or the based on the independent variables. You can either use the average rate or you can use the equation. Again, it all depends on the size of the development. And there is guidance in the ITE handbook. So as you can see, the dotted line is the average rate, and the solid line, as you can see here, it's the okay, that's the fitted curve, the solid line, and the dotted line is the average rate. And as you can see, the number of dwelling is the independent variables on the bottom, and then average vehicle trips or trip ends, it's the dependent variables. And let me just talk about this land use 820 shopping center. In the manual, it says the shopping center, the out parcels outside the shopping mall has an effect on the outcome. Okay, they have that added collected data for this land use, but it doesn't tell us specifically which one of them they have included these out parcels to this. So that was one critical issue that we really have to little bit do more studying and see which one of these land uses that they the data that they collected have the out parcels included in there. Out parcels, as an example, could be a bank or for example, ice skating rink. It's outside the shopping center, but in the same area. All right, let's look at one simple trip generation example. Okay, let's say we have 10 homes being built. Okay, and let's say with these 10 homes being built, there is 10 daily trip generation rates for each single home. So how do we determine the impact or trip generation? Let's do this poll and see if we all agree on one answer. So we have 10 homes being built and 10 trips are generated from each single family home. Gary, you're working on the poll? I think we lost Gary. He's the one who has
I
access.
am here. I
You're
am here. I was
okay.
just unmuted myself.
All right,
so
no problem.
I am. Pay no attention to the man behind the screen, and I will ask you now. How many trips is that? All right, I can tell, but we knew this ahead of time. This is the advanced group. Right. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share it. Now, I know we made a big deal about, cars coming in and cars coming out, but since the actual trip rates included the car coming in and car coming out, it is 100 trips. It's 10 times 10 and not 10 times 10 times 2. So definitely most of you got this. Okay. And what I like to say at this point is if you can multiply, you can be a transportation planner, but you are not allowed to tell anybody how easy that is.
Very good. Okay, I think we have very good, well-experienced groups online with us. Okay, so we got 100 dwelling units times 10 trips. Like Gary said, these trips are already trips, so we don't have to multiply it, double the trips. So 10 dwelling units times 10, that makes 100 trip ends. All right, again, this is another example using the ITE land use code. This is apartment, land use code 220. And by looking at average rate for apartment, land use code 220, the average rate is 6.72. Okay, so let's do another example, which is very simple. We have someone who is proposing an apartment complex with 100 dwelling units. The average trip rate, which we just looked, was 6.52, I believe. Let me look at it one more time. 6.72. Okay, so they are proposing 100 dwelling units. Okay, so we have 100 dwelling units times the average rate from ITE, and that determines the trips or the impacts from that trip development, 672 trips. Okay, okay, since 2010 here in Florida, we have done many research. We have looked at many different land uses. We have looked at Family Dollar, Dollar General, and trip distribution centers, discount home improvement stores. So we have these research projects have been completed. They are available online, and specifically when it comes to gas stations, as we all know, when we drive around, we don't see those small gas stations anymore. Most gas stations have changed to 12 or more fueling positions, and most of them have convenience stores that sometimes those convenience stores are over 5,000 square foot, serve, they just like restaurants, serve food. So really the characteristics have changed. So there was a need for us to look at these large gas stations as well. So these documents are available online, as I said. It is on FDOT's website, and also we have a webinar that's being recorded, and that's on YouTube as well. So these are really informative documents, and I suggest you, when you get a chance, take a look at them. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much, Gina. I believe I have the controls right now, and let me reiterate that we only have a certain amount of time, and so what Gina did is provided you with links to really all of our most recent information, and as she pointed out, the Dollar General and the Family Dollar stores are called variety stores. And these all came from the study that was done for DOT. Martin Guttenplan, who is online with us, was the project manager of that. And as Gina mentioned, we also have a changing environment of land use. Like she said, mom and pop gas stations, they're not the usual anymore. They're going into much larger ones. Drive-in banks have changed dramatically. There are probably no more video stores when they were a big deal just a few years back. So things are always changing, and here's a caveat for you. You're driving, and you're traveling from San Francisco, and you see this sign here. You want to know how far it is from to San Diego, and the sign says 632 miles, 0.125 miles. And some farmer who by the side of the road said it's roughly 400 to 500 miles. Who is more correct? Well, actually, the farmer is a lot more correct. And the point here is, just because we have all these studies, you do need to think about some of the changes that have happened, how old some of this data is, and the fact that they have these trip generation rates out to 2 decimal points doesn't make them accurate. It only makes it seem precise and accurate.
Gary,
So,
before you go any further,
yeah.
could you put up the link that we had for the studies that we've done here in Florida?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let me. Yeah. Do you want me to go to them so you can see?
Somebody needed to know where these. I think they wanted to write down the link. Yes.
You don't. Yeah, you don't want to write it down. You want to
click on it.
Yeah. Well, you want to take this
Or
link. You will find in the handout, which is available.
Yes.
And if you need help finding it, we can help you. And again, there is. Yeah, I don't think that's. Yeah. So you see, we have a bunch of information here on trip generation. A lot of the work that we've done. You also see the Site Impact Handbook and a number of other things you might be interested in. Okay, and we are pretty proud of the fact that we're trying to get as much of our good information, including the webinars that we have up on YouTube. It's been a great service for us. Okay, certain strict restrictions may apply, your mileage may vary. We're talking about this. What's missing in a lot of the trip generation studies are the smart growth development that still, even though they are changing, ITE is really really made an effort to broaden trip generation out past just vehicle trips, but to person trips also, and to try to get more information from transit-oriented and smart growth developments. But still, most of the data that had been collected in the past, free parking and very little transit. So keep that in mind. And that's the reason that we're trying to keep up with new transportation studies. Do speak to reviewing agencies and people about land uses that don't seem to have a lot of data. We have found that a lot of good trip generation studies done for some local governments end up in a file cabinet. Just recently, we've been sharing information on large distribution centers and finding out that we don't always know how much. Okay, trip generation. Gina showed you the 2 lines. She also showed you the equation on the page. The editors of ITE always put the equation where they felt there was enough data to, and they also felt that the equation was better when there was sufficient data. However, like I said, I think critical thinking is important in this. This is a screenshot from Otis, which I believe currently is the ITE preferred software for trip generation, and this is for the shopping center, based, I believe, on the 9th edition. And as you saw, this is the curved line here is the equation, and the straight line is just the average rate. Okay, and you can see that there is a great big difference when you're looking at 1,500 homes, a 1,500 home subdivision development. The fitted curve says 50,000 daily trips, and if you use the rate at 75,000, that's quite a difference. There is a lot of data here, but even more data in the smaller, but not much over here. And you can see each of these X's is an individual development that was studied. So again, you can see just because there is a very precise figure, it doesn't mean you're going to be accurate. I'm always looking for new graphics to use in training, and I just found this. Somebody was protesting some transportation fee, and this is what they put down in there. Gina suggested that instead of the golden retriever, it should be me. So the 3rd edition has come out recently. The 3rd edition Trip Generation Handbook, which is different than the Trip Generation Manual. The Trip Generation Manual is the very thick, weighty document with all the graphs in it and most of the data. The Trip Generation Handbook is the guide for how to use the data, how to collect more data. It has instructions for things such as mixed use internal trip estimation. It's and as I said just recently that they are really trying to encourage more study of smart growth development and more analysis of person trip making, not just vehicle trip making. We just had a question. When do you use the rate or the equation?
Gary, I suggest you go back to the ITE that you just showed, the average rate, and also the right before this one. Yeah, this would. Yeah.
And you know, according to what at least what it said in the past in the ITE trip generation handbook was that you know the equation is better because there's more data, and there is a general tendency, the larger of any kind of development, for trips to be handled, more opportunities for trips on site, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But on the other hand, every development is different. And what you're also going to hear me say in a little bit is that there is an ongoing professional battle right now about trip generation that is much bigger than this battle over when to use average rate and when to use the fitted curve, or where you might want to work with the reviewers and choose something in the middle based on some knowledge you might have. Okay, I guess the main thing is that when you are working on a study for a developer or a development, then when you're working with the agencies that will be doing the reviewing, or in some cases giving you the fees that need to be paid, there needs to be a two-way street on this, because you can see there are big differences. There are different kinds of trips that ITE recognizes. I'm not going to go over all of them today. The primary trips are the ones that are origin and destination. That means this person is at home, they go shopping, they come home. Pass-by trips are a big discussion item anytime a commercial development is built. In this case, person is going to work, this is their home, they stop for donuts, and then they head on to work, and that's called a pass-by trip. So a certain amount of this site development trips are not new. Not going to go into great detail here, but there's something called a diverted trip, which is similar to pass-by, but instead of using the same road, like this one is assuming here, think of a discount outlet mall off of I-95. So you got people going from their vacations in Miami to New York, but they love the prices at the St. Augustine discount mall. So they get off and they drive on a few streets to get to the discount mall, and then they head back, and that they're going back to New York. Generally, we consider these trips new trips unless they are very, very close to let's say the interchange. And then of course the interchange itself will definitely have more traffic, and so that is an issue. And that interchange is a public facility, whereas this person's driveway is a private facility. So here's the home, here's the convenience market, they are going to the office. Now, like I said before, during a typical hour, There'll be 100 going in and 100 going out. But in this particular case, this supermarket here has a 20% pass-by, and guidance for this is found in the ITE Trip Generation Handbook. So where it really matters in a site impact study would be at the signal. You know, this is 100 trips leaving during, let's say, the PM peak hour, and they're going in this direction, but of those 100 trips that you projected coming from this store, only 80 of them are new. And as you look at the data for pass-by, some of them can be quite high. These pass-by trips only apply to retail. Even though you may stop at the office on the way back from a restaurant to home, it's just not that much to count. So it's usually, these are retail oriented land uses. The most recent, and that's the third edition of the ITE Trip Generation Handbook, shows this scatter graph of different studies for pass-by for different size shopping centers, the code 820. You can see they're all over the place, but you can also generally see the smaller the store, and you know, I don't like the what's the word I'm looking for, the scale here, because a 100,000 square foot shopping center is a community shopping center. It's not a, you know, a really small store, but you can see they have them in there. But as the size of the development, and I believe this would be like 1 million square feet or 1.2 million square feet, the more the primary trips take over. You know, this would be for jewelry shopping and major clothes shopping. We just had a question here. Is there a cap number for pass-by trips? And what we recommend in the handbook is that it should never or rarely go above 10% of the adjacent street traffic. This is strictly a common sense check and is not based on scientific data, but it has been used frequently, and it is just a guide that has been used quite frequently in the past. We had another question here, and what's the break point between pass-by and diverted trips? And we, as in those of us in this office, in our discussions now, I think we mentioned this before, the handbook is guidance, it's not rule. And we are constantly trying to help people with knowledge, use that knowledge in a with professional judgment, and not necessarily just, oh, this is what the number says. But we don't have a break point that we've written down and said, well, if it's the St. Augustine you know, outlet center, that's okay, that's the diverted trip. But if it's the Publix that's 5 miles from the interchange, that's a new trip. We just ask you as a professional to use your judgment. Now, this is an example here, and I'm going to show you that, you can, how you would do this, if there were 3,000 trips per hour on this 4-lane roadway, also with no median, then the correct way to do it for this size center is, if you were using 24% pass-by, which you got from your negotiations and from other places, that would be 435. However, 435 is over that 10% of the 3,000. So it should be adjusted down to 300, and using the same proportions of in and out. And then, we're doing this. We think we've done a good job at trying to explain this in training. And then somebody points out, I don't know if I can draw. They say, well, what if there's a median over here and another driveway in here? And what if this is a side street? What about the traffic on this street? And we said, wow, that really does make a difference. So again, what we have here is a very simple concept of the 10%, which we have not found in, science or studies. And the other thing is that as you look around the site, it could be surrounded by more than one road, and it can, of course, be impacted by medians, traffic signals, and median openings. So you got the general idea here. We have a recording of what I think is a really good, detailed recording of pass-by trips made by somebody else other than myself. And here's the link to it. And there is also what I think is an excellent but dated webinar on access management. It's about the pitfalls, which goes into some of the things that you've heard here. But in this case, you will be able to go back and relook at things that might have passed by you. But the information that we're giving you today is the most up-to-date. Okay. I'm looking at, okay. Looks like the question was answered for the adjacent street traffic, and I appreciate that. Okay, internal capture is also a very contentious item that can be part of your traffic study. And with a lot of the larger developments, there's a lot of discussion about what are the true impacts. Okay, this is from the old ITE Trip Generation Handbook, 2nd edition, 2004. At that time, they only recognized 3 switchable, interchangeable land uses, and they were shopping, housing, and office. And this is an example from that older handbook. Now, we debated on how much detail to go into here, and we're gonna go into a little bit more detail than you might want, but we're gonna give you one side of the calculation so you understand what's going on. And so I will use the example of 5 pitchers and 3 catchers. We have a shopping center here that, if you calculate it using the trip generation rate, has 72 trips coming in during the PM peak hour and 75 trips leaving during the PM peak hour. This is according to just the calculations. These were estimates. And on the same site, they have a 35,000 square foot office building. And if you do that calculation, there's 35 trips in during the PM peak, and of course most people are trying to go home. There's 171 of them leaving. Now, you would really like to minimize the projected impacts on the surrounding road system, so you would like to say, all these people leaving retail are going to be headed to the office. Well, there's 75 vehicles leaving the office, but only 35 entering. So even if 100% of the ins my drawing is horrible, come from land use A, then only 35 of these 75 can make it. So what that leaves is 40 of these trips, or 40 of the balls that are tossed at the catchers, will end up in the road. Okay, but that is unconstrained. That's unconstrained. I have the portion of a invisible spreadsheet that shows just one side of the calculations, and it's unconstrained. And by unconstrained means 100% of what's possible can happen. In that case, there were 75 leaving, but only 35 could enter. It always figures what the least amount is, and that becomes the internal captured entering. But of course, that's not realistic. So that's why studies were done. And I'm not going to go over this right now. This will be in your handout in case you want to go over how everything was calculated. But what I am going to get at is how we constrain those numbers based on data that we've collected. Okay, and just historically in the handbook, tables 7.1 and 7.2 of the trip generation handbook has these maximums. So instead of that 100% that you saw here before, a maximum of 3% of people leaving on-site retail were going to on-site office according to the studies done. All right? And so you put a 3% there. And then from table 7.2, a maximum of 31% of people coming to the on-site office came from on-site retail. So in order to get this data, you can't just count cars. You got to talk to people as they're coming in and leaving stores. And that's very difficult. So in this case, you run the calculations again with the 75 exiting and the 35 entering, and with these constraints put on it, you really only get 2 trips. So, and that's more realistic based on the numbers that were in the second edition. So you see here, so now there are 64 trips that now make it to the street. In 2011, the National Cooperative Highway Research Program added to the data by spending quite a bit of time for those of us that followed it. Finished in 2011 and studied 3 more developments, and they added 3 more land uses to it. They added the, let me get the laser pointer here. They added hotel, they added restaurant, and they added cinema. Don't ask me if I agree with this, but they did. But in this 2011 report, they completed the work that was done and combined it with the 3 developments that were studied back in the 1990s here in Florida to come up with new tables. They looked at Atlantic Station in Atlanta and 2 stations and 2 developments in Texas, Mockingbird and Legacy Town. Atlantic Station is right near MARTA. As you can see, Mockingbird Station is right near the heavy rail, and Legacy Town does not have fixed rail transit, but is probably considered a smart growth development. Okay, here are your links to find the data and the spreadsheet. The new tables have added restaurants and cinema and hotel. And the spreadsheet that you will find at that link contains a way to calculate using these new, what I always call push and pull features, those maximums. And as you can tell here, they really have tried to put information in here that you can use for, let's say, a transit-oriented development. So you can, it's multimodal. And the ITE Trip Generation Handbook now recognizes that method as the preferred method for internal capture. Here's some important considerations which some of us on this floor think are even more important than the written guidance you'll find. None of the factors that you look into in any of these reports, I'll go back here, these factors here are all just the maximums that they discovered from the various studies that they have done for different developments. None of them really ever looked at how much isolation there was. Competing origins and destinations. Was this far away from the central city? Was this next to lots of places where people could shop? The site design, the compatibility between income levels and on-site employment. If you have a bunch of millionaires living in a place that is far away, and most of the employment that's in that development are jobs at CVS and Publix, your models aren't even going to be that accurate. The other is the maturity of the development. This is what I was telling you earlier on, that you know, the arguments that we seem to get into about the equation, rate, how to do internal capture is on the backdrop really kind of small potatoes compared to, I think, a larger ongoing professional debate that is, and hope I'm not over speaking. It seems like it's a debate with the ITE establishment and the possibly the smart growth community establishment. And they feel that there is a gigantic bias against mixed-use developments. And I have here some very interesting links that ITE usually doesn't share with you in their webinars. But that's all I'm going to say, is that they really feel that the methods that we've used in the past for trip generation are not sufficient for today's developments. And actually, you do see an ongoing debate at the ITE community sites online for things called phantom trips. So with that, are there any other questions? All right. Now, because we here at DOT can't leave well enough alone, we have actually went ahead and actually got more data than even the NCHRP did, and Gina was the project manager for that study that ended last year, done by the Center for Urban Transportation Research, and we're going to hand over controls to Gina to talk about the study that was done here.
Thank you, Gary. And as Gary said, even though there are research done at the national level, but here in Florida, we would like to do our own. And obviously, the more data collection, adding to the existing data for ITE, that makes the whole data point more accurate. Therefore, that gives us a better estimation of trip generation. So earlier we talked about trip generation from each individual land use. Now we're going to talk about the research that we've done for internal capture. Okay, the activity that goes on one side, so vehicles do not leave the site. So the more or the higher internal capture, the less impact of that development on the transportation system. So with that said, NCHRP 684 was released, so that methodology is incorporated into the ITE methodology. So we had Qatar Center for Urban Transportation Research to do a separate research here in Florida. So we came up with some criteria, and we had Qatar to look at those criteria and go choose the sites. So we go a little bit further. Gary, I'm not able to advance my, okay, very good. All right, so we had Qatar to look at 4 sites. One of the sites was Creekwood here, Bradenton, near Sarasota. As you can see, they looked at restaurants, retail, and residential. And as you can see, the sizes of each land use type that they looked at. And this site was the most standard suburban of all the locations that they looked at. All right, and the next one was Uptown Altamont near Orlando areas. And this one was dense and diverse, located in a major suburb of Orlando. And as you can see, the individual land use, multifamily residential, hotel, and mid-rise residential, movie theater, and office. And as you can see, the sizes that they looked at in this multi-use development. And the other side is Lakeside Village in Lakeland. And this was suburban and mixed use, but very minor amount of housing in this area. And again, these are the sizes that researchers studied. And the other location is Soto, that's the south of downtown Orlando, and this was the most dense and diverse of all the locations that Carter looked at, because due to this development being so close to city downtown. The data is done, it's available online. We give you a link, it's on FDOT's website. You can read the whole document. You can also, if you want, request the whole raw data if you want to look at the data. So what the research did, they really stood at any entrance, each driveway. So that's called the cordon count. So later on, when I refer to cordon count, is the count that researchers or the interviewers stood at the each entrance and counted the cars going in and out the development. So that's called the cordon count. Then they went to each individual site. Let's say they went to an office and started interviewing people going in and out. They asked them, where are you from, or where are you going to now? So those interviews were done as well, besides the cordon counts, counting the cars from the entrance and exit of this multi-use development. So at the end, this is the comparison that Cutter did with NCHRP. Remember, NCHRP 684 looked at Atlantic Station. They looked at Legacy Town Center and Mockingbird Station. So we had actually Boca del Mar, Country Isle, and this one, Village Commons, is the study that was done in 1993 for District 4. So Cutter did the comparison to NCHRP, to also the data that was done in 1993 for District 4, and then they use 100% as a margin, so they can do a comparison between all these studies and all these locations. And as you can see, the study that Cutter has done is very close to NCHRP, and if you can really see the color well, the lime green color is the ITE single land use right here, and the next to it is original ITE 2004 method, and the one next to it is the NCHRP 684 that was done in 2011, and the one right next to it is NCHRP plus the study that FDOT did in 2014. And as you can see, the ones went above the 100% margin. Those were overestimated. The one way under 100% underestimated. And as you can see, some of these are very close to other methodology or data collection that was done in the past. Any questions? Again, data is available online. The whole research project is done, and it's available for anyone who would like to have access to it. It's on FDOT's website.
Gina, we got a question here. There was a link on slide 74 that is not working, and I really don't know what happened there, but I should be able to correct that and find I think it was probably in the way that I pasted it. On the other hand, if you really need to,
we can go back to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and both of the links have problems, even though I went to both of those places this morning. So I know that the links are working. I was wondering if a whole bunch of people tried to go there at once, whether there would be a problem or not.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, it's working.
Well, that one's working. How about the?
Sometimes it could be the internet connection.
Uh-huh. What about, which one did you click on? That one?
This is Nathan, Gary. I clicked on the getting trip generation right.
Yeah. Okay. And try the EPA one. Yeah. Okay. The problem that you had might have been everybody clicking on it at the same time. I know I had a problem when the person mentioned it. All right.
All right, very good. So We got our next webinar, which would be on the larger scale regional transportation models. And again, chapter 2 is the biggest chapters. And then we, on the next webinar, we will talk about trip distribution, mode split, and trip assignment. Okay, and again, these are the dates for upcoming training sessions. Session 4, July 23rd, Session 5, August 20th, and Session 6, September 17th, and Session 7, October 29th. And again, we got great free resources. Please take a look at these links. Our FDOT website, Systems Planning website, is up to date, and we have uploaded most of the research project we have done. Any document that you're looking for, take a look at our Systems Planning Office website. If it's not there, all of these research projects are on the Research Office website as well. Or if you are missing something, or if you are looking for a link, or you're clicking on a link and it doesn't work, please let us know so we can look into it and fix it. So let's do another poll and see if before this webinar, how familiar were you with these resources?
All right. Let me find those polls again, and I will launch it. Give you highly recommend that that you do check out our links and tell us when they're broken. Here's another. Don't try to use too much logic in finding information on our website. Just use Google. And all right. Well, I am pleased to share with you that I'm glad that we have an informed group here. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Gary. All right, we have our information here. Please feel free to contact us, email us. The best way to do is via email. You can send us, all of us, an email at the same time. We make sure to get back with you with the answer to your questions. And again, as Gary said, and as I mentioned earlier, if you are looking for a document and that's not available to you online, please let us know. We'll be glad to send you that document. If you're looking for the internal capture data, that's available as well. So with that said, I'm going to thank every one of you for attending today, and please join us on the upcoming webinars. And again, if you have any questions, let us know. We will send you the presentation in the next day or two, and we will have the recorded webinar available online probably in 1 or 2 weeks. So again, I thank you, and I'll turn it over to Gary in case Gary has any
yes, I did. We had one question that did you do studies to see if the actual trips matched what was predicted? And we actually, could you, Nathan, give me controls?
You have controls now.
Oh, okay, good.
Gary, you want to go back to the graphs?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I mean,
very good. Yeah.
At least I'm gonna try to do it.
Yeah, that would be a good comparison.
Yeah, I didn't. You don't want to pay no attention to that. There's supposed to be other. Okay, this is what I'm looking for right here. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and I'm going to use the do something I've never used before, and I'm going to use the magnifying glass. Okay, and this shows the light green is the light green are what would be calculated if you added everything up. And oh, look at that. That is the wrong one. So with that, I am going to go
Just go to the one that you didn't want to show. You can
right. That's what I'm going to do.
I think that one actually is very more helpful.
I really apologize. Pay no attention, but this is the one. Oh yeah, wait a second. I got confused. It's this line here. This line is this is a graph that I looked at for a long time, and it took me a while to get it. And this line where it says 100% is an index. It's not like the number of trips. So the closer to this line, the closer that the real count, that Gordon count that Gina was talking about, was to the calculation. And so you'll see here that for Atlantic Station, Boca Del Mar, Country Isles, Creekwood, Lakeside, Legacy Center, Mockingbird, Village Commons, it is really close using either the NCHRP 684 or the NCHRP, which we've added other factors to from the 4 other studies we did, also very close. Everything except SODO was close. And if you remember, SODO is the one that is downtown. So I apologize for getting confused there, and I hope that answers that question. All right. So with that, we will, if any of the links are wrong, we will get them, and we welcome you to our YouTube and our website to get a lot of this information, and we welcome your questions. Thank you so much. Appreciate your attendance and your attention, and I will end the webinar right now.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.